World output is projected to decline by 1.3% in 2009 as a whole, and the recovery only gradually in 2010, growing by 1.9%. The United States is grappling with the financial core of the crisis. But to Professor Rodney Shakespeare, Professor Shakespeare, a lot of economists are saying green shoots. Some are saying only yellow weeds. Your comments.
The problem is much more fundamental than what is being understood. You see, something has gone wrong. It's gone wrong in the philosophy, in the intellectual understanding, and in the practical mechanisms. And what has gone wrong is that a huge, great bubble was created. And that bubble has two components, not only the debt, but the interest associated with debt. It actually has a third component, which is the money is in all the wrong places. Now, nothing which is being done at the moment actually addresses those issues. What they're trying to do is to recreate the bubble, recreate the interest, recreate the debt, and put the money into all the wrong places. So I'm afraid at the moment in the stock markets you have something like a suckers rally, that is to say something which is only temporary, and we have a process which is going on further and further down. They are showing no understanding of what is the problem. They show no likelihood of coming to a gentle and powerful solution, which must include stopping the creation of money by the banks, stopping them, letting them lend their own money and the deposits of customers with permission. And then you must open up an entirely new money supply directed towards spreading a productive capacity right the way throughout the population. Now, if you don't do this, you are going to have a collapse on a scale which is utterly inconceivable. And I happen to think that a lot of this hype about the flu business at the moment is part of distracting people from the increasing depth of recession, which is starting to accelerate and going downhill.
Tyson, let's go to Washington and see what's going on in the World Economic Outlook of the IMF said just a couple of weeks back. The United States is grappling with the financial core of the crisis. And of course, New York Times, when economic decline in quarter exceeds forecast, the American economy is contracting at its steepest pace in 50 years, the government reported on Wednesday, that is just a few days back, but an unanticipated rise in consumer spending since January suggested to many economists that the worst of the recession might have passed, or has it?
Yeah, I do have to slightly disagree with the other guests' largely pessimistic outlook. I do think that some of the more recent indicators here in the United States does appear to suggest that we've reached the bottom and that better news is just around the corner. Jobless claims were down in the last reporting period. Warren Buffett, in his address to his shareholders, Warren Buffett, the very esteemed U.S. investor, talked about that the housing market predicament might be finally bottoming out, and he saw a cause for good news going forward in the U.S. Housing market. So I do think that there are some positive elements. I think that the American stimulus package, while not it's not going to be successful at addressing all the problems, is just still beginning to trickle out into the economy, which is going to be a help. I think that Congress is starting to tackle other structural issues. We're starting to deal now with credit card debt to ensure that credit card companies are not being too onerous onto consumers, because it is important that we continue to maintain our consumer-driven economic growth in the United States. So I do think that while the economic situation is still very, very serious, I do think that there are a couple of indicators that give us pause for some possible positive news.
Well, before going to Professor Shakespeare for response to that, let's go to Newsweek. Between a bull and a bear, of course, if we say, all right, now Professor Shakespeare is kind of bullish here, kind of bearish here, and you, Tyson, happen to be bullish here. Let's see what Newsweek has to say. It goes, is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it a Superman? Investors cannot seem to figure out whether the recent leaps in stock prices represent a brief uptick in a falling market or something more meaningful, even the start of a brand new bull run. The broad consensus is that the U.S.-led global economy faces too many structural headwinds to enter a meaningful expansion phase. And, of course, to Dr. Doom and what he had to say. He himself calls himself Dr. Realist, according to Newsweek here. And here's what he said. I think the market is way ahead of real economic and financial data. I think people are deluding themselves. I hope he's not talking about you, Tyson. Rubini told reporters during a business lunch in Hong Kong on Monday, he said problems that U.S. financial institutions had not been fully revealed and forecast their losses would rise to $3.6 trillion from $1 trillion so far during the crisis. So let's go to Professor Shakespeare and back to you, Tyson.
I do think Tyson is taking a rather shallow view of some of the fundamentals. And he mentioned housing. Housing traditionally has been 2.5 times to 3 times, the price of a house, 2.5 to 3 times average earnings. But then in the UK it went up to 6 times or 7 times, and in Latvia it went up to 10 times. And in the USA some of the price rises were 6, 7 and 8. Now that has to collapse to come back to reality, and you're just crying for the moon if you think anything else. Tyson mentioned the consumer credit bubble. That consumer credit bubble will crack, and it will crack because of the increasing unemployment in the United States. There's another big one which hasn't happened yet. It's the commercial real estate bubble. That one is likely to happen in the next 6 months, and it'll be absolutely horrific. And then behind this, there is the derivatives bubble, which is estimated, no one really knows, but say we say $550 trillion. Only a percentage of that needs to collapse, 3 or 4%, and you're hitting figures as large as the US economy. And in response to all this, you have a policy coming from the present American government and from the UK government, which essentially bolsters up the thing which has created the problem and makes no attempt to recognize what the problems are. So I'm sorry, I go with Dr. Doom and with the consensus of the economists who are actually seeing that things are continuing to get worse.
Tyson?
Well, I do think that Congress and the executive branch are working on a deal right now to try to keep more Americans in their homes and to limit the risks of defaults that would put a ceiling on some of the problems that we're seeing in the banking crisis. I mean, right now, all we've seen from the United States in response to the housing problem is releasing capital to the lending institutions, to investment banks. We haven't seen them adequately address the problem of rising defaults on mortgages that people can no longer pay.
That's right.
I am confident that Congress and the executive branch is going to work out a deal to keep more people in their homes, and that's going to, I think, help matters a great deal. I don't mean to sugarcoat things. Things are very, very serious in the United States and across the world. I do think, though, that some of these recent indicators show some signs of encouragement that we might have reached the bottom. And so I'm confident that going forward, as long as the executive branch and President Obama keeps their eye on the ball to keep more people in their homes, to reduce the risk of default, and to have smart structural reforms of the industry while maintaining effective, targeted government spending, I think that we can get out of this mess.
Go ahead. Tyson, but your housing market was full of crooks and charlatans right the way through, and here you are, 2.5 years after the faults became apparent, you're telling me that your government is going to address the issue. I mean, it's too little, too late, and you don't have a mechanism for addressing the issue. All your bailouts are going into the banking system, into the crooks who created all this thing. It's a 30-to-1 ratio between those banksters who are crooks and to what's going to effectively go to solve the practical problems of people with their houses and their jobs. It's not only the housing, it's the job market is cracking as well. You claim 9% for your unemployment. It's 16% at least, and there are forecasts that you're going to go to 25 or 30. The problem is much bigger than you understand, and your government cannot do anything because it is controlled by Wall Street. That is your fundamental problem. You have a system and an understanding now which is purely concerned with the concerns of the financial elite, and it's lost out of all contact with the real economy of Main Street.
Well, Tyson,